Part 3, a brief outline of the Old Testament history and the major landmarks of the development of the Pentateuch according to the contemporary biblical scholarship. The Captivity Era. While in exile, the Old Testament community of the faithful never lost its faith and kept looking back at its own past with repentance. The prophets, with Ezekiel among them, who died circa 570 BC, helped their faith stay alive. It was in the exile that the Torah took on its current shape, and when many of the Psalms were compiled. The hope for liberation was born at about 540 BC, when the Persian king Cyrus II began to loom as a threat to Babylon. This was the time when one of the greatest prophets of the Old Testament was writing and prophesying. His name remained unknown, and his writings became part of the prophet Isaiah's book. This took place because this prophet had been a follower of Isaiah's. In biblical scholarship, this herald of salvation and the minstrel of the suffering servant of God, the Messiah, is referred to as Deutero-Isaiah. He wrote chapters 40 through 55 of the book of Isaiah. Chapters 56 through 66 were likely written by him as well. Furthermore, chapters 13 through 14, chapter 21 verses 1 through 10, and chapters 34 and 35 of Isaiah have also been attributed to Deutero-Isaiah and his circles. The Restoration. After the Persians captured Babylon, the Jews got permission to go back to their homeland, yet only part of the people returned. The first group who returned from exile was headed by the high priest Joshua and Prince Zerubbabel. In 520 BC, prophets Haggai and Zechariah stepped forth with an appeal to restore the temple that had been burned down by the Chaldeans. The temple was rebuilt in 515 BC, but the hopes for independence and restoration had not yet come into being. The spiritual life of the people who had returned to their now desolate, impoverished country began to decline. The prophet Malachi described all this in his book, 5th century BC. The Scribes. Acting in the service of the Persian king, Nehemiah the Jew arrived in Jerusalem circa 444 BC. He restored the city walls and attempted to revive the spiritual life of the Jewish community. The Samaritans, the remnants of the northern kingdom's population mixed with the migrants from the east, opposed these attempts. Since Nehemiah wished to improve the overall decline and demoralization, help had been rendered to him by Ezra, a priest and a scribe arriving from Babylon. Ezra summoned a general assembly in Jerusalem and made the people take an oath to keep faithfully the laws of the Torah. From this point on, the process of the Jewish isolationism began. As a response to Ezra's extremes came the books of Ruth and Jonah, which targeted against the ethos of national isolationism. The Sages of Israel. The wise men, or the sages, in parallel with the scribes, began to play a significant role in the Old Testament community of the faithful between the 5th and the 3rd centuries BC. These sages were no proponents of national isolationism, even though they had been faithful observers of the law. They wrote the book of Job, the book of Ecclesiastes, and they reworked and edited the books of Proverbs and Song of Songs. Jesus, son of Sirah, the author of the eponymous book, was one of the later sages, writing in the 2nd century BC. The genre of their writings is known as biblical wisdom literature. Jerusalem's priestly class composed the so-called priestly history that dealt with the history of the kings, the captivity, and restoration in the spirit of the ecclesiastical Old Testament tradition. These are the 1st and 2nd books of Chronicles. The prophetic tradition, meanwhile, was taken over by the prophets Joel, Deutero-Zechariah, and the apocalyptists of the school of Isaiah. In these works, we find the first mentions of the faith in the resurrection of the dead. The keepers of the scribal tradition became the men of the Great Assembly, or the Great Synagogue. According to the Talmud, the Old Testament sages and teachers of the Second Temple period are credited with an important role in the formation of the biblical canon. This was a magisterium, or given authority, to disseminate the rules of the oral and written Torah into all the spheres of life. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like and share, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future videos.